What a fantastic film. Like, not only does it pay a great tribute to Chadwick, but it took me on such an emotional journey, and the action is top-notch. You got everything in there for everybody. The first question I have for you is the legacy of Chadwick and T'Challa is felt throughout this film. Can you talk about how his legacy was felt throughout the whole production?
Yeah, look, Chadwick was a larger-than-life person on and off set, and I think certainly the cast and Ryan and I, we all had really deep relationships with him, and he was inspirational. And so you try to take that inspiration with you when you go to set every day, and certainly there was a feeling like we all felt him at different points in the process. He was a big part of this storytelling. These films, Civil War and the first Panther. So. Often when things got difficult or you start to lose your way a little bit, you sort of think about how he would react to those situations, and hopefully it would give you a center to kind of point towards.
Nice. Yeah. Now, let's talk about Namor for a second. He's such an interesting character with such strong motivations. Sometimes he toes the line between hero, anti-hero, and villain.
Yes.
Where would you like to see Namor go next?
Boy, I'd pretty much follow him anywhere. I think Ryan made him such an interesting character because he's not the villain of his story. He's the hero. And because he is seen as a god to his people, and his goal is to protect them.
Right. That
couldn't be more altruistic. I think the lengths of which he goes might be extreme, but if you think about experientially what he's dealing with, the generational trauma of having to be forced from his homeland, his people, I think it is, if not defensible, certainly understandable.
Yes.
So if you think about where this character could go in the MCU from here, I think there's a lot of different things he might like to do and try, and hopefully we get to explore those stories.
Hopefully we do get to explore those stories. Riri Williams gets introduced in this film, and I couldn't be happier. What a fantastic character. How does her experience from meeting Shuri and in Wakanda kind of impact her going forward into the future of the MCU?
Yeah, I mean, you think about this woman who was plucked from a relatively normal life as an MIT student who all of a sudden has encountered an underwater civilization, gone to Wakanda, flown to Mexico, and then is plopped back into a world at MIT. I certainly think it colors how she thinks about what we would call the real world, and I think it might set her on a different course in her show because boy, it's going to be hard to go back to doing homework after what she's just experienced.
I mean, I'm so excited for her Disney Plus show. I'm curious to see how this kind of plays into that. Everett Ross, I love the character. He has a very interesting connection to somebody that's been popping up a lot in Phase 4. Val Allegra de Fontaine. Will we see that relationship explored further, possibly in somewhere like the Thunderbolts?
Certainly, this is not the last time you will see Valentina. I think now clearly her and Ross might find themselves at different tables, if you would, at the same restaurant. No, look, the detail about their past relationship was something Ryan thought would be really fun and interesting to explore, and so hopefully we'll get to build on that. But Valentina, much like Nick Fury in Phase 1, we're slowly building the story of a woman who maybe has her finger in more pies than you think, and we'll just see if that's a good thing or a bad thing for the MCU.
Black Panther Wakanda Forever, man, what a film, right? I have to ask you from a producer standpoint, either in front of the camera or behind the scenes, was there a moment that kind of stood out to you the most during either the production of the film?
Oh, that's a great question. There are a couple moments. One moment that was just like, wow, we were blown away moment was the scene in which Ramonda demotes Okoye.
Oh, man.
And Angela Bassett's performance on that day was so spectacular. I've been on a lot of sets with a lot of crews, and you're pretty inured to people giving good or bad performances. At some point, you're just sort of doing your job. And that performance actually stopped the set. Like, people were like, wait, what just happened? And I, if my memory serves, I think there was literally a standing ovation because it was like watching a special effect in real time. Like, I always think about that scene, even whenever I can watch the scene all the time, and I'm like, man, this is the most impressive thing in the movie, and it's just a performance.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And sort of 1A to that is Shuri's performance in Jabari Land, which again, you're like, wait, this is just this is just special effects without the special effects. This is just someone operating at the top of their game. And I remember our sound mixer going like, I've never seen anything like that. And this is a man who's worked for 30 plus years in the business. You know, you just see people believing in their craft and employing the craft in a way that is sort of above and beyond, and it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, top to bottom, every performance you felt you felt the gravity of everybody in this film.
Yeah.
Namor, we were talking about him just a second ago. Why was this the right film to introduce Namor, his people, and his kingdom?
Because there's such an interesting contrast between Talokan and Wakanda, and that's, I think, what drew Ryan as a storyteller to Namor in the first place. Obviously, there's a history in publishing of Namor and Atlantis, and the Black Panther and Wakanda being at loggerheads, because they are both such powerful nations that have such autonomy. But to also tell the story of colonization through the perspective of two people who've experienced it so differently, made for a really interesting collision of ideologies. And Namor is such a powerful character. It's hard to think of anybody who could challenge Wakanda, right? It's the most technologically advanced nation in the world. At times it has a Black Panther, if not the Dora Milaje. Man, who's going to scare these guys?
Right.
And that is a very short list. And all of a sudden, they're faced with somebody who's more powerful than anybody they have, and it forces them to respond in a different way than any other person would, really. And you know, Namor is such an important character that you have to commit time to get to know him. So it's not like you can throw him into an ensemble and say, also this guy.
Right.
You want to take the time to build out that world, and hopefully, you know, we were able to achieve that with the same love and dedication to the details as we did with Wakanda in the first movie.
Absolutely. Now, Talokan, I want to talk about that for a second. Obviously, historically in Marvel Comics, Namor's from Atlantis.
Yes.
We get this way more grounded kind of mythology about Talokan, which I really, really love. Can you talk to me about when that decision was made in the process of pre-production?
Yeah, it was pretty early on. Ryan, again, was a fan of the comics, but Atlantis in the books is maybe vaguely Roman in inspiration, but pretty vaguely. And Ryan is a filmmaker who likes to understand the details and get really granular. And again, wanted to anchor it into something that felt real and tactile that he could think about and really understand how to design. And also, again, thematically was interested in thinking about colonization and indigenous peoples. And so was sort of inspired after a lot of thinking by Mayan culture and what had happened to them historically and where they are today. And to have that conversation, and again, inspired by, right? Because we don't pretend to be historians, but to be able both to bring some of the beauty of that culture to life, but also to have that conversation in the guise of a Marvel film felt really interesting, and again, hopefully lands for people.
Now, back to Wakanda, one of the most beautiful places in the MCU.
Yeah.
Is there a character, whether you've introduced already or haven't, that you'd like to introduce to Wakanda?
Oh, interesting.
Storm, X-Men, maybe?
Well, I mean, Storm's relationship with Wakanda in publishing is pretty interesting. Obviously, we might be a few years out from the X-Men, so I'm not sure we're there yet. Who else from Wakanda have we not introduced? I mean, there's a pretty deep bench, actually, and especially I think Ta-Nehisi's run introduced a lot of cool characters that would be fun to export. And even like characters like Vibraxis, which are sort of more kind of Fantastic Four characters, but like, yeah, it's a pretty deep bench. You know, I think there's a lot more stories to tell in Wakanda for sure.
Absolutely. Speaking of more stories to tell in Wakanda, is there any update to the Wakanda Disney Plus series that's rumored to be happening?
No updates. You know, it's definitely something we're interested in exploring with Ryan. Obviously, this movie took a lot of everybody's energy, and the Ironheart show, which is nearly done. But there are a couple of really great ideas that we're developing. So hopefully, one comes to fruition sooner rather than later.